Welcome back. This is Commander Ray Ford, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter for Session 3, which will discuss inspection readiness. Our next speaker is Hector Colon, MPH, Lieutenant Commander, United States Public Health Service, Bioresearch Monitoring Program Expert, Office of Bioresearch Monitoring Operations, Office of Regulatory Affairs. Welcome, Lieutenant Commander Colon Torres.
Thank you very much, Commander Ford. Today, I will give you a brief overview of what does an FDA inspection look like. The two main objectives of my presentation are to provide an overview of the FDA BIMO program and the role of the Office of Bioresearch Monitoring Operations, and to provide an overview of the general elements of an FDA inspection and the basics of a BIMO inspection. The Office of Regulatory Affairs, or ORA, is the lead office for all FDA activities. ORA inspects regulated products and manufacturers, conducts sample analysis of regulated products, and reviews imported products offered for entry into the U.S. There are 6 centers that oversee the regulatory and compliance activities of the products and firms regulated by FDA. The Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, the Center for Tobacco Products, and the Center for Veterinary Medicine. All 6 centers generate and issue field assignments to ORA. The Office of Bioresearch Monitoring Operations, or BIMO, is one of the program-based offices within the Office of Medical Products and Tobacco Operations in ORA. BIMO oversees all domestic and foreign field inspection operations related to the BIMO program, including all clinical and non-clinical research conducted in support of pre-approval, licensing, pre-market, and marketing clearance applications submitted to the agency for products regulated by all FDA product centers. The 3 main inspection goals of the BIMO program are to protect the rights, safety, and welfare of subjects involved in FDA-regulated clinical and non-clinical trials, to verify the accuracy and reliability of clinical and non-clinical trial data submitted to FDA in support of research or marketing applications, and to assess compliance with statutory requirements and FDA regulations governing the conduct of clinical and non-clinical trials. What type of establishments we inspect? Establishment inspected include sponsors, monitors, CROs, clinical investigators, IRBs, radioactive drug research committees, in vivo and in vitro bioequivalence and bioanalytical clinical and analytical sites, and non-clinical laboratories, or also known as GLP inspection. In addition to these establishments, starting in May 2017, BIMO is also responsible to conduct PADE and REMS inspections, both which are post-approval activities. What is the basis of our inspections? Surveillance inspections are conducted as a routine assignment with no other indicators of noncompliance. So, for example, an inspection of a firm whose previous inspection was classified as no action indicated, or NAI. And I will talk about inspection classification in a few minutes. Another example, a firm selected for validation of data that was submitted to FDA in support of a marketing application. Should go back. A compliance inspection is conducted to investigate potential violations that have not already resulted in an official agency action. and consumer complaint inspections are conducted in direct follow-up to a consumer complaint. The compliance inspection may include complaints which are not the primary reason for the inspection, non-compliance reports received from sponsors, IRBs, and or local regulatory authorities, MedWatch reports, adverse drug experience reports, or information from confidential informants. Consumer complaint inspections are conducted to confirm allegations within the complaint or root causes that may have led to the conditions described in the complaint. So when do we pre-announce or we do not announce or unannounced inspections? So for domestic inspections, inspection of clinical investigators, sponsors, CROs, RBs, and RDRCs, these will be pre-announced unless otherwise instructed in the inspection assignment. For by equivalence clinical and analytical inspections, GLP, REMS, and PADE, these inspections will be unannounced unless otherwise instructed in the inspection assignment. All international inspections are pre-announced. So the first thing the FDA investigator or representative do upon arrival to your establishment is to present the FDA credentials. The FDA investigator might be carrying a badge similar to the ones being shown on the slide here. However, the credentials are the official form of identification for FDA employees. After presenting the credentials, the FDA investigator will issue the form FDA 482, or Notice of Inspection. The body of the form includes the provisions within the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that grant FDA jurisdiction to inspect and collect records. A Form FDA 482 is not required to be issued on international inspections. On the first day of inspection, the FDA investigator will conduct an opening interview with the establishment most responsible or delegated person. On this interview, FDA investigator will describe the scope and the basis of the inspection. And FDA inspections should be sufficient in scope to cover special instructions in the assignment and to determine if the site's practices and procedures comply with the appropriate regulations. Also, the FDA investigator will offer to have daily discussions regarding the inspection progress. Also, during these discussions, we give the establishment time for them to ask and answer any questions, explain any issues observed during inspection, and to provide any pending or requested documents. These discussions also help to avoid having any surprises or misunderstandings at the closing of the inspection. A refusal is a refusal to permit an inspection or prohibiting the FDA investigator from obtaining information to which FDA is entitled under the law. In the case of drug inspections, inspection refusals, as well as delaying, denying, or limiting the ability to conduct inspection, may cause the drug to be deemed adulterated under Section 501J of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. There are three main documents that will dictate the scope and inspectional approach. These are the compliance program, the assignment memo from the center, and the investigations operations manual. The compliance programs are based upon the establishment type to be inspected and provide instruction on what to cover during the inspection. The assignment memo includes specific instructions regarding studies and protocols and or products to be covered during the inspection. The IOM provides general instruction on inspections and specific information on BIMO. There is a compliance program for each type of BIMO inspection as shown here on the FDA website. At the bottom of the list, you will find the PADE and REMS compliance programs. One thing I would like you to remember from my presentation is this acronym here, ALCOA. Good documentation practices are critical for data integrity. Do your records meet ALCOA? Records should be accurate. Does the recorded information describe the conduct of the study without error? Did the conduct of the study conform with the protocol? Who made corrections and when corrections were made? Records should be legible. Can the information be easily understood? Is it recorded permanently on durable medium? Have original entries been preserved? Records should also be contemporaneous. Was the information recorded with timeliness? Records should also be original. Is the source information accessible and preserved in its original form? And last but certainly not least, records should be attributable. Does the documentation clearly demonstrate the link to its source? Who observed and recorded the information? When the data was observed and recorded? Upon completion of the inspection and before leaving the premises, the FDA investigator will provide to the highest management official available the inspectional findings on a Form FDA 483, Inspectional Observations. The issuance of written inspectional observations is mandated by law and ORA policy. So this is how a 483 looks like, and the 483 will include the FDA district office address and the contact information, the dates of the inspection, the name of the person the 483 has been issued to, the name and address of the firm inspected, the type of establishment inspected, of course, the list of observations, and then at the bottom of the form, the name, title, and signature of the FDA employees and the date issued. The FDA 483 Inspectional Observations is intended for use in notifying the inspected establishment's top management in writing of significant objectionable conditions relating to products and or processes or other violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and related acts which were observed during the inspection. The inspected establishment has 15 business days to respond in writing to the 483 in order for their response to be considered before any regulatory action is initiated by FDA. Upon completion of the inspection, ORA recommends an initial classification. There are three types of inspection classification. The No Action Indicated, or NAI. This classification is recommended when no objectionable conditions or practices were found during the inspection, or the significance of the documented objectionable conditions found does not justify further FDA action. Voluntary Action Indicated, or VAI, is recommended when the objectionable conditions were found and documented, but the district and or center is not prepared to take or recommend any of the regulatory actions, since the objectionable conditions do not meet the threshold for regulatory action. And the official action indicated, or OAI, this classification is recommended when objectionable conditions were found and regulatory action should be recommended. The Assignment Issuance Center has final classification authority. Remember that ORA only recommends a classification. The centers will determine and assign the final classification for the inspection and initiate regulatory actions if warranted. If you would like to learn more and get more information about FDA's BIMO program and the different compliance programs, please access the links shown here. This concludes my presentation, and now I will turn the microphone over to Marcia Helber, Consumer Safety Officer with the PADE Compliance Team.
Thank you, Hector. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcia Helber. I'm in CDER's Office of Compliance, Office of Scientific Investigations, and today I'm going to tell you how to get ready for an inspection. The objectives of my presentation are to describe the inspection process, explain how FDA uses the information, and recognize best practices for paid inspections. I'll start by saying that FDA regulators and industry share the responsibility to protect the public health from dangerous, ineffective, or unsafe drugs. The paid inspection program is an important part of this goal because it ensures that FDA safety evaluators are receiving complete, accurate, and timely safety information about marketed products. Paid inspections are not pre-announced, so you want to be ready. This slide illustrates areas that FDA investigators will focus on once they are inside your firm. Although our time today does not permit me to address each one of these areas individually, I am going to say a few words about those areas that seem to show up frequently as problematic during inspections. This slide illustrates some of the most common objectionable conditions observed by FDA investigators during inspection. On the top there, we have late, unreported, incomplete aggregate reports. That would refer to periodic reporting. To the left of that, we have failure to develop written procedures. Underneath that, we have late or unreported 15-day alert reports. That refers to individual case safety reports. And the bar on the side shows additional observations that FDA investigators have made during inspection. An objectionable condition is any condition that, in the judgment of the investigator, may constitute a violation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And the investigator notifies you of objectionable conditions at your firm at the conclusion of an inspection by writing them on a Form 483. So now I'd like to go over these and tell you, I'm going to go over some of these and tell you how you can avoid them. Number 1, failure to develop adequate written procedures. One of the most common objectionable conditions observed at firms during inspection is a lack of written procedures for surveillance, receipt, evaluation, and reporting of post-marketing adverse events to the agency. As Diane Bruce told you this morning, adequate written procedures are mandatory. You must have them. They are required by statute. And the reference for that is in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, these statutes that I've shown here on the bottom of the slide. Your written procedures should describe in detail the way in which surveillance, receipt, evaluation, and reporting will be performed at your firm. If your SOPs are adequate, you're telling FDA that drug safety is being performed consistently and that people are performing their duties in a consistent manner and with predictable results. As we said previously, written procedures must address all 4 elements shown here: surveillance, receipt, evaluation, and reporting. When creating your written procedures for surveillance and receipt, be sure to account for all incoming PADE data. Drug safety has become a multidisciplinary activity, and safety information for your marketed product can come from many sources, so you have to account for all of them. If you own an FDA-approved application and co-market your product with a business partner, pay very close attention to what your business partners are doing with your safety information, because FDA holds applicants responsible for compliance with PADE regulations. You want to make sure that you have a clear set of documents in place with your business partners and that it functions well. I said a few words about surveillance and receipt. I'd also like to say a few about evaluation and reporting. All adverse experiences must be evaluated as study or spontaneous, serious or non-serious, labeled or unlabeled. And additionally, reports from studies must be evaluated for relatedness. And these evaluations are significant because it's the evaluation step that's going to determine how a particular adverse event is reported to FDA. So make sure that your written procedures are clear on these steps. A second common inspection observation is failure to submit all adverse drug experiences that are both serious and unexpected to FDA within 15 calendar days of initial receipt of the information. And the regulatory citations for that are shown here, Code of Federal Regulations on the bottom of the page. These regulations that I have cited here, these 3 refer to individual case safety reports, which are reports that describe an adverse event for a particular patient. If an individual case safety report describes an adverse experience that is both serious and unexpected per the U.S. label, it must be reported to FDA as soon as possible, but in no case later than 15 days. And failure to do this is a violation of these regulations and is going to be cited on a 483 by the investigator during inspection. Please also remember that these regulations require each serious and unexpected adverse experience to receive an investigation. And as Saranjan said earlier this morning, all your submissions of individual case safety reports must be electronic. A third common inspection observation is failure to report each adverse drug experience not previously reported under those regulations you saw on the other slide at quarterly intervals for 3 years from the date of approval and then at annual intervals. So in the previous slide, I was talking about objectionable conditions related to individual case safety reports. In this slide, I'm focusing on aggregate reports, or the periodic adverse drug experience reports, or PADERs for short. Just to be clear, an individual case safety report is not the same as a PADER. The PADER is comprised of aggregated data received by an application holder during a specified time interval. These PADERs are important to FDA. The PADERs update FDA with worldwide safety information about an approved product at defined time points after approval. And a list of items that must be included in a PADER can be found in the regulations shown here. During inspection, know that investigators are going to be reviewing your PADERs to confirm that all the required elements are included in the document and that it was submitted to FDA on time. In the previous slides, I pointed out some common objectionable conditions that have been observed by FDA investigators during inspections. And now that you know about these, hopefully you can self-identify and make corrections prior to having these things pointed out to you by FDA during inspection. And to do this, you're going to have to develop corrective action plans at your firm. A corrective action deals with any nonconformity that has occurred, and it seeks to eliminate the cause of the noncompliance. When executing a corrective action, try to do a root cause analysis to uncover the real cause of the problem so that it can be addressed in a way that makes it unlikely to recur. Use some sort of system for logging and monitoring your corrective actions so that trends can be identified. Ultimately, your goal should be to focus on future improvements rather than on recurring problems over and over. Now we're going to talk about what you can do if, despite your best efforts and everything you've learned here today, you find yourself on the receiving end of a Form 483. The 483 is a document issued to management at the close of inspection when the investigator observes any condition that in his or her judgment may be a violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. But the Form 483 does not constitute a final agency determination of whether any condition is in violation of the Act. FDA's Office of Compliance will make that decision, and we consider the Form 483, along with the investigator's written report called the Establishment Inspection Report. We consider all evidence collected on the site, and we may consider any written response submitted by your firm. So there's 4 good reasons here why you may want to submit a well-written response. As I said, number 1, FDA will consider it if it's timely before making a final decision on the compliance status of your firm. A well-written response demonstrates your acknowledgement and understanding of the observations. It demonstrates your commitment to correct them, and it establishes your credibility with the FDA. A written response to an inspection is not mandatory. It is optional, but it gives you a chance to tell your side of the story before the Office of Compliance makes its final determination as to the outcome of your inspection. If you disagree with an observation on a 483, and it is okay for you to disagree, you should indicate why you think the investigator made that observation and then explain why you think it's not valid. And you want to always do that using sound, scientific reasoning and including good documentation to support your position. This slide gives some suggestions for writing effective responses. Number 1, include a commitment from your senior leadership. If you're a team leader or maybe a department head, you may need buy-in from people above you to make change, so show that you have that. Number 2, address each observation on the Form 483 separately. 3, note whether you agree or disagree. 4 and 5, provide corrective actions and those that are completed and planned. What you want to do here is investigate the root cause for your observations. Don't just say that you're going to retrain everyone because that seems to be an easy solution. Really take the time to look into the processes and systems of your organization and correctly identify the root cause. A good response should provide real solutions and documentations. For item 6, provide a timeline for completion. 7, a method of verification or monitoring the effectiveness of the actions. Now for 6 and 7, what we really want here is for you to develop a corrective action plan that's reasonable for your organization and give yourself timelines that are realistic. This is important because FDA is probably going to do a reinspection to confirm your corrective actions. Number 8, submit documentation. And number 9, submit the response within 15 working days from the time you received the 483. The response gets submitted to the district office that issued you the 483. Do not submit any inspection response to the application. I'm going to say that again. Do not submit your inspection responses to the NDA, ANDA, BLA. Your inspection responses must be in writing within 15 working days to the district office that issued the 483 to you. What happens if you miss the 15-day deadline? Bad things. If a 483 is received within 15 business days, FDA will conduct a review of that response before determining whether to issue a warning letter or taking any other actions. And if FDA decides to issue a warning letter after reviewing a timely response, the warning letter will recognize receipt of the response. However, if FDA receives a response more than 15 days after the 483 was issued, we will not delay the issuance of a warning letter in order to review your response. And this is a question of fairness. It treats all firms the same. And the other reason for this policy is that FDA wants to tighten and speed up enforcement actions to protect the public health. So again, do not miss your 15-day deadline to submit a response. So in conclusion, my takeaway messages are: prepare, prepare, prepare. Adequate preparation for an FDA inspection may result in a more positive outcome for you. Remember to refer back to the regulations whenever possible to ensure that your pharmacovigilance activities meet requirements. And remember to submit a well-reasoned, complete, and timely written response to the district office that issued the 483 within 15 days after you receive the 483. So, in conclusion, companies that don't comply with paid regulatory obligations face significant repercussions. And hopefully, using the tools presented here today, your company should be able to successfully prepare for an inspection. Always refer to the regulations to make sure that your company is in compliance, and consider doing a self-inspection using what you've learned today to identify your own deficiencies before FDA finds them and points them out to you. Create and execute corrective action plans for anything you find. Maintain records that are structured, usable, and accessible. And if you receive a Form 483 at the close of inspection, use what you've learned today to initiate corrections and communicate them to FDA. The final 3 slides in my presentation are a list of the regulations that may apply to your business, and I would suggest that you save these and use them for reference. And that concludes my remarks. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Haley Seymour, who will speak on REMS inspections.
Hello, this is Haley Seymour again from the REMS compliance team, and I'm going to speak about REMS inspection readiness. So the $1 million question is, are you ready? I don't know. Can you answer that? Let's go over what you as the applicant can do to get ready for a REMS inspection. First of all, let me repeat that REMS inspections are unannounced. So to be ready, you must stay ready. The best way to survive an FDA inspection is to be prepared. So you may wonder, how can I be prepared for a REMS inspection? You should be familiar with your REMS program and the FDA compliance programs that are applicable to your drug. You should train the staff that are working on the REMS program that they understand the process and can articulate the process to the inspectors when they come. And while we're at the inspection, please communicate with us, and even after the inspection, communicate clearly with us. So I had discussed earlier that some REMS inspections include medication guides. You may be wondering what you should do as an applicant to be prepared for an inspection with a medication guide. When we go on the inspection, you should be able to provide a copy of the medication guide and any package inserts, and provide us a hard copy, which is the one that was approved with the REMS. And that should be the one that is also provided to the patients when the drug is dispensed. If you have a communication plan as part of your REMS, what you need to do to prepare is have a copy of all of the communication materials that are distributed. That includes Dear Healthcare Provider letters and any other requirements that the communication plan designates. You should be able to provide documentation of the professional journals that are required, and that should include the volume of the journal, the date of the journal, and the issue of the journal, because the communication plan has specific requirements that we are looking for, and you should be able to provide that. If you are presenting any of the REMS material at a scientific meeting, you should be able to provide the dates in which that information has been presented. For inspections that include a TASU-A, what should you have ready for the inspection? You should be able to provide any kind of documentation of any implementation practices that you have in regards to a TASU-A. You should be able to provide documentation of any healthcare providers that are certified in your REMS program, and any kind of documentation that shows us that your database with the healthcare providers is validated and the database is secure with certified healthcare providers. And if you have any non-compliance, you should be able to identify it and provide documentation of any corrective action that you've taken. For inspections that include a TASU-B, as an applicant, you should be able to provide more documentation of any pharmacies, practitioners, or any healthcare settings that dispense the drug. Again, if you have a database of certified pharmacies, practitioners, or healthcare settings, you should be able to provide us with some documentation that your database has been validated and it has been maintained. Additionally, make sure that you can provide documentation of any understanding of the pharmacists and practitioners of any of the high risks associated with the REMS requirements for that program, and that could include site audits. And also, any documentation that you may self-identify, you should provide any documentation of non-compliance that you have seen. For element C, as an applicant, please make sure that you have documentation of the distributors of the drug and any non-compliance that they have, that you have documentation, any documentation that the drug that is shipped is only shipped to facilities that have been certified. Also, provide documentation of any compliance of the REMS program requirements that the applicant had taken, and any documentation of any surveillance of the risks associated with the REMS program. I don't know if you're seeing all that we look for is regularly is documentation. So make sure that your documentation is up to date. For element D, we should see documentation that all the patients that are involved with the drug have safe use conditions, and that the prescribers are able to submit the forms, and also that the database is maintained and validated and it is secure, and provide documentation of that. And if you have a call center that is associated with your REMS, provide documentation that the call center is up to date and maintained. For ETASU E, the applicant should be able to provide documentation that the patients are being monitored at specific times according to the requirements of the approved REMS, that the documentation includes the monitoring that is used for the patients, and that if there are any issues of non-compliance for the patient or the pharmacy or the practitioner or the healthcare setting, that you provided documentation. For element F, as the applicant, you should be able to provide documentation of any of the activities related to implementation of ETASU F. You should provide evidence that you have a registry and that your patients are registered in the registry. And if there is any issues with enrollment, that patients are not being compliant, they're not being enrolled in the registry, you need to show documentation of that. So if you have an implementation, a system associated with your REMS, as the applicant, you should provide documentation of the REMS program call center. All the people that are associated with the program call center should be familiar with the practices and the SOP, and even sometimes we will call the call center and speak directly to the people manning it. You should be able to provide documentation that your REMS program website has been validated and it is maintained. And if you have audits, we'd look for a summary of those audits and any audit plans that you may have in regards to the implementation system. Okay, so if you are unfortunate to get a 483 untitled or warning letter from FDA, how should you respond to it? You should be able to ensure that the communication provides an adequate response to the observation, and that the response is easy to follow, and that the corrective actions are in place to fix any issues that arose. Each response should address the central issue raised by the observation, and it shouldn't give your opinion, but it should provide a factual, objective evidence that permits evaluation, and it aids FDA's understanding of your response. Your letter, your response should have buy-in from your senior leadership. Each observation should be addressed separately, and if you disagree with the observation, you should provide your reason, and you should also provide any preventive actions, any corrective actions, any corrective plans that you plan on completing, and also include timelines for completion of these corrective action plans. Also, provide a method of verification or monitoring for your corrective action, and submit documentation, which could include records, SOPs, training, or CAP.
This is Commander Ray Ford, and we're moving into our second and last Q&A panel for the day. We invite you to continue submitting your questions, identifying the relevant speaker. We'll begin in a few moments.
Hello and welcome back. My name is Peter Dyack. I'm the team leader from the REMS compliance team, and I'll be answering some questions that we received prior to the lunch break. The first question is, are REMS inspections separate from PV or PADE inspections? And the answer is yes, they are separate inspections. However, sometimes we do combine them, and we will ask the investigators to conduct a separate REMS inspection along with a PADE inspection. And there may be multiple investigators as part of that inspection. Next question is, how long will a REMS inspection last? And as I mentioned, all REMS are unique, and it depends on the particular REMS program is how long that REMS inspection will last. If it's a very intricate REMS with a lot of the different elements, and it has a TASUs, and the firm is a little slow providing that documentation, we might be there for a little while. If it's a short REMS, a MedGuide only REMS, we might be there just a couple days. So it varies based on the complexity of that REMS. Another question. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of single shared system REMS, but I got a lot of questions about single shared system REMS, so I will try and touch a little bit on that, but I again refer you to the recent guidances that came out about single shared system REMS and waivers for single shared system REMS. But the first question is, how do expectations for individual sponsors differ with regards to a shared system REMS versus a typical REMS? They have the same requirements based on the statute. They have to follow the REMS as approved. What gets complicated is when they work together, the different sponsors, to generate and create that single shared system REMS, and then their expectations and the financial impact is outside of our purview. So I'm not going to go further down that path. I would just refer you to the guidance. Then another question is about regarding single shared system REMS and the materials. I had mentioned that you need a single set of materials, and the question is what to do when one of the products have exclusive indications that the other products might not have. And I just wanted to point out that with REMS, we're not talking about indications, we're talking about the risks. So the different indications would not be part of that REMS. or single shared system REMS. The single shared system REMS would be specific onto that risk factor that we're trying to mitigate for that particular indication. There's a question about are REMS inspections announced or unannounced, and would it be helpful to give 1 to 3 days of heads up? We do not give heads up. REMS inspections are unannounced. And then there's, again, talking about single shared system REMS. If an innovative firm is being non-responsive in cooperating with the shared system REMS, how would a generic firm resolve such issues? I would refer you to the waiver guidance that just came out, and there is a waiver process. There have been some waivered shared system REMS that have been approved for lositron and sodium oxybate. So there are examples of waived shared system REMS. And just a couple more. If a company has multiple U.S. locations, how is the REMS inspection location determined? We go to the headquarters, what's listed on the primary cover page when we communicate with the applicant holder. Another similar question is if the FDA shows up at a company location that the REMS activities are not done, will the inspection proceed? Or will it be adjusted to take place at where the data is? We would proceed with that inspection. We expect that the information would be able to be gathered by the application holder, since they maintain statutory obligation for that REMS program. And then the last question I have is, how will we know if our firm will get a REMS inspection? And you won't know. These are unannounced. However, if you look at our risk-based approach and the number of REMS that are currently approved, you can kind of estimate how often or when you might see FDA as part of a REMS inspection. I'll let Haley Seymour talk a little bit more about REMS.
Well, thank you. The questions are really good questions. One of the questions that we've received is, do all prescription products need to have a REMS in place? The answer for that is no. Not all prescription drugs are going to have REMS. Only certain drugs with greater risks that cannot be managed by labeling have REMS. Additionally, a question states, does the FDA post REMS inspection summary findings? And the answer is no. And then the rest of the question says, will they do it annually? No, we do not post our inspection summary findings, and we don't plan on doing that. Another question I got was, how many REMS inspections are conducted each year? We conduct about 15 inspections based on our risk-based approach. We generally inspect firms that have ATASUs, firms that have issues, and we had an earlier slide that actually shows you how we determine what firms we inspect. Another great question was, how often does the risk-based approach for REMS inspections dictate that a REMS inspection will be conducted? For inspections, they are classified as NAI. Those inspections we will probably come back to visit in about 3 years. VAIs, 2 years, and OAIs the following year. And none of this is in stone, but that's our general rule for re-inspections. Peter, do you have another great question?
Let me see here. Yes, another question is keep asking about single shared system REMS inspection and how are they conducted? Are they conducted at the contractor or the individual application holders? And that is up to our judgment. We can go out to the contractor sites and conduct an inspection at the contractor, or we can select one of the individual application holders and just go to that application holder or go to several of those application holders, since they all have the same requirements to ensure that the REMS program is operating appropriately. I think that's all we have right now for REMS inspection questions. We'll be passing it over to Hector and follow up on ORA questions.
Thank you, Captain. Again, this is Hector Colon Torres, BIMO program expert. I have a few questions here that I would like to address. Okay, so I have two similar questions I'm going to try to answer simultaneously. First, is FDA looking for Alcoa Plus? And there's a similar question that says, ICH E6R2 brought Alcoa C, adding complete as a data requirement. Will ORA list be updated? So, someone in FDA came up with this acronym many years ago to describe good documentation practices. So one thing I want to make clear is that Alcoa itself is not a regulatory requirement. So when you see that acronym, it's only a guidance, and it's a good guidance. So with that being said, anything above and beyond Alcoa or Alcoa C is totally acceptable as long as you maintain good documentation practices. Okay, next question. Can you have an NAI classification with an inspection with a 483, or is this NAI only for inspections with no 483 as an outcome? Well, the answer, I guess I'm answering the first question. The answer is yes. Yes, a 483 could be issued even if there is no action indicated. Now, on the other hand, for VAI and OAI classifications, there should be a 483 associated with those two classifications. So, so if no 483 is issued, the classification recommendation would be NAI. There are very few exceptions of observations that we do not list in the 483 that could trigger regulatory action, or could trigger the center to classify the inspection as VI or OAI. Registration or labeling violations come to mind. But to summarize, there should classification should be, if no 483 is issued, the classification recommendation should be NAI. But yes, you can have an NAI with a 483. I hope I didn't confuse you more. So I have another question here. Why are all international inspections pre-announced? Okay, so all international inspections are pre-announced for various reasons. Number one, FDA is a guest agency in a foreign country, and jurisdiction is different than compared to a domestic inspection. In addition to this, FDA is required to get an invitation letter from the establishment to be inspected before we confirm the inspection dates. This letter is provided to the firm on our first contact, and the firm is required to fill the information and return the form to us. Also, the foreign country local authorities are also notified of FDA intentions to inspect. Okay, one more questions here. can a firm find out the inspection classification that the agency has assigned? The answer is yes. It is available in the inspection database at the FDA website. This inspection database is continuously updated. There's another question here. Can you provide some examples of the types of regulatory actions that can be taken associated with a warning letter? Well, a warning letter is already a regulatory action. The only thing I can say is that FDA has different type of regulatory actions that can be taken depending on the results of the inspection and future inspections. I think that's all I have for now. I'll pass the microphone over to Marcia. Thank you.
Hello, this is Marcia Helber. I'm going to answer a few questions that were sent to me. How long does it typically take to receive a final 483 observation report back from FDA after the marketing authorization holder, or what we call the applicant, has submitted a 483 response? As a general rule, our goal is to get back to you in about 120 days. Now, from personal experience, I can tell you that someone once sent me a 483 response that was so big and so large and so voluminous that it crashed my computer when I opened it. If you send me a response like that, it may take more than 120 days to get back to you. Next question. If a vendor is used for pharmacovigilance, will FDA inspect the vendor or the sponsor? And the answer is yes, either may be inspected. We may inspect both. Next question. Does off-label use need to be investigated? The requirement to perform an investigation is for adverse experiences that are serious and unexpected, whether that adverse experience is off-label use or not. If it's serious and unexpected, it needs an investigation. If it is missing one of the 4 elements required for the reporting, it also should have an investigation. Next question. Marcia, what is the FDA expectation as to the industry when a 15-day report is submitted late? As we know, this is not ideal, but will occur. My expectation is that you have a corrective action plan for each late report. And this is because I want you to look at your own deficiencies and address them before FDA walks through the door. If you look at your own late reports, sometimes you can see trends. And by that I mean that maybe you'll see that a particular business partner or a contractor or a subsidiary or someone is not performing as expected. Maybe you'll see that you have staffing issues. Whatever it is, looking at why a report is late helps you eliminate these trends so that your pharmacovigilance department can become more sort of forward-focused. You don't want to constantly go back and fix the same old problem over and over. So if FDA shows up at your facility and we see repeated violations over and over again, well, we generally consider that a bad sign. We have some other questions. Rick Abate is going to answer for you.
Well, as we have time for more questions, we're going to go ahead and answer some questions that we didn't get to from the first session from this morning. First one was, what are some good examples of how a small company should oversee and document oversight of outsourced activities performed by a PV vendor? As I discussed this morning with business affiliates, there's different types of means to demonstrate that you're looking at what your PV vendor is doing. They can send you a monthly report of the submissions that they've completed. You can have meetings regularly. So there's different ways to oversee what they're doing. Just be in contact with them to see the activities that they're doing, and they're doing them as you intend them to be done. I have another question here. It was directed to Marcia, but it's from this morning. Should a firm report a 15-day alert report if an ADE report is received from a study where the suspect product relatedness is unknown? Well, the requirement for reporting 15-day alert reports from a study is if it's the reasonable possibility that it's related to the drug. If you don't know, then there's a reasonable possibility that it's related to the drug, so it should be reported. Here's another one. What defines what is expected in the label? Are only events in the adverse event reaction section, or are events identified in the clinical trial section also considered expected? The requirement is it in the U.S. label? So if it's any section of the U.S. label, any adverse event in any section of the U.S. label, it's considered labeled and therefore expected. What happens once a firm submits a written response to the FDA Form 483? This is one of Marcia's, but it's in my pile, so I'll go ahead and answer it. Sorry. What happens once a firm submits a written response to an FDA Form 483? How will the firm know what is the status of the response? With the BIMO inspections, the center now issues a classification letter at the end of our evaluation of the assessment that we make. So you'll get that letter that we talked about, that we have our goal is 120 days to get the letter out. We'll get the letter out to you, and in that, if you've submitted a response, we'll acknowledge the response and that we have reviewed it. And then one last one from this morning. If a reporting due date is on a Saturday or Sunday, can we consider Monday as the reporting due date? The requirement is 15 calendar days, so unfortunately, the weekend is considered those calendar days. So if your due date falls on a Saturday or Sunday, it's still due on the Saturday or Sunday. Monday it would be considered late if you submit it on the Monday.
All right, so this is Ranjan Day, and I'm going to be responding to two questions I have, maybe three, on electronic submission. So first question, if the safety system does not allow attachments for PDF, can literature article be submitted separately? So when you submit a PDF, they must be submitted via the reporting method used for submitting the ICSR. So if a firm used the safety reporting portal to submit the ICSR, they can attach the PDF to that report and submit. And if the firm is submitting via the E2B method through the gateway, then they must submit via the gateway by appending or adding the safety report number into the properties of the PDF and then submitting that via the gateway. Another question, can clinical study 15-day expedited reports be submitted via MedWatch form instead of E2B format? Currently, we do not, FDA does not have a mechanism of accepting pre-market safety reports electronically using the E2B format, so they need to be submitted to the ECTD as PDF MedWatch forms. And one last. Nope, I think that's about it.
Okay. Thank you to all of our speakers for your very informative and timely talk, and also for responding for the questions that came in. We thank the audience for your considered questions, and if your question was not addressed, please resend to CDER SBIA at fda.hhs.gov. Be sure to identify the speaker to whom the question is addressed. A few closing reminders. This activity has been pre-approved by RAPS as eligible for up to 4 credits towards a participant's REC recertification upon full completion. You will be able to obtain the attendance certificate only upon completion of the survey, which will remain open for 2 weeks. We acknowledge that due to the high registration for today's event, some individuals may not gain access to the live webinar. As such, for this event only, we will honor viewing the recording as qualifying for the RACCEs, provided that you review the webinar and complete the survey within the next 2 weeks. Let us know your comments and feedback via the survey. This will provide us with ideas for future improvements. On behalf of CDER Small Business and Industry Assistance, we hope that you enjoyed today's presentation and found it helpful. We look forward to your presence at future webinars, which will be advertised on our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA webinars. Thank you.